So I will reconvene us for our final stretch of the 28th Annual Wallace Stegner Symposium. We've been working our way through identifying problems, getting a sense of potential approaches from them, getting a sense from our political and religious and community leaders of approaches to trying to resolve some of the challenges presented by the state of the lake. And we're going to focus even harder, more directly on those questions for these last two sessions. This session addresses the question of recommendations. We have speakers from three separate entities that have been created for the express purpose of addressing the Great Salt Lake and the problems that it confronts. Let me identify our speakers to begin with in the order that they will speak. And the format that we've laid out is somewhere between 5 and 10 minute presentations from each. I may have a couple of questions at the conclusion of their initial presentations, and then again, we invite your questions through Slido, and we've got, I think, enough time to get to a number of those questions, I trust. Leland Myers is the Executive Director of the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council. And also a member of the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, created in 2010. We'll hear more about that. John Lynn is the Associate Director of the Wilkes Center for Climate Science and Policy here at the University of Utah, also a professor in the Department of Environmental Science. And he has served on the Great Salt Lake strike team that you've heard about previously. And we also have with us Marcelle Shoop, who is director of the Saline Lakes program for the National Audubon Society. And also, as you've heard, Audubon is part of and a critical part of the Great Salt Lake Water Trust, which is overseeing a $40 million trust fund established by the legislature. So all of these folks are directly involved in contributing to solving the problems that confront the Great Salt Lake and us as a community. So Leland, let me turn it over to you to start with.
Thanks. I need to take just a personal note to begin with. 25 years ago, when I began working on the Great Salt Lake and doing research on the Great Salt Lake, I met Linda Freitas. And for those of you who don't know, Linda Freitas is the superhero of the Great Salt Lake. If you haven't shook her hand, if you haven't patted her on the back, then you are remiss in your personal responsibility, because this is a hero. Now, having said that, I'm working with the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council. I'm a member of the Great Salt Lake. For those of you who don't know who the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council, which is, I'm sure, everybody in this room, except Jim over here, the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council are your sewer people. Now, we've come up with lots of different terms for sewer, but it's all the same crap. And that's what we handle. And we got involved in the Great Salt Lake because that's where a lot of the water that we generate, you generate, that comes through a sewer goes. And the only question is, how clean does it need to be when it gets there? So we got involved to try and do research, and we've been spending $500,000 to $1 million a year on Great Salt Lake, Jordan River research for the last 15 years, trying to understand this ecosystem. And so we got involved and we thought, we got to get better And then I got invited to be part of a group that was going to establish, under Governor Huntsman, a council to look at the Great Salt Lake. But it wasn't called a council. It was going to be a commission, because we wanted to give this commission authority and power. Who knew? It only would take the legislature 13 more years from 2010, when the council was established, to today to give power to a commissioner to actually make authoritative actions to help this lake. So with that in mind, a moment of history. Great Salt Lake Council was established in 2010, and subsequent to that establishment, we were there to provide advice and information on the sustainable use, protection, and development of the Great Salt Lake. So when I look at other people's documents, which this is one of them, I get really excited because I see on those documents lots of study information that we generated. Today, during the slideshows, I've seen numerous slides that presented information that the council came up with. We didn't actually do it ourselves. We hired researchers. With the pitiful amount of money we had, we still did a lot of good work. And this is a list of some of the studies that we have done that are important studies. The one that everybody in this room's probably heard of is the $1.3 billion economic value of the Great Salt Lake. That whole study cost us $25,000. We beat a consulting firm down on the price until it was affordable. And we came up, and then we went back to all the industry groups and we said, you got to give us real numbers. And so they all gave it to us, as long as we promised not to divulge who was what. But we got a number that people could look at as to its economic value beyond just the number of birds you see out there. It has other significant values to the citizens of the state, because not everybody's a bird watcher. Don't know why they don't want to do it, but they're not. And so in that study, we came back and we said, we're going to study a whole rift of areas. But the two I want to talk about today directly relate to you as individuals. The first one is a water conservation impact study. And what we charged the consultant to do, again, for a pitiful amount of money, was to take a study approach which looked at the water resources by water area. These are water districts. It could be a conservancy district. It could be a metropolitan water district. But look about those that are in this watershed and look at what they need to do to provide water for the Great Salt Lake. And one of the goals was to say, and if you look at this graphs are great, right? If you're an engineer like me, graphs are great. We love them. And not everybody else understands. But what I want you to know is that blue block of water is what's developed today and what can stay developed as it dwindles a little bit due to global climate adjustments, changes, whatever we want to call it today. But due to those changes that are occurring, we're going to see that blue block dwindle. And what we told the consultant is, look at what it's going to take within that water conservancy area to live within the blue block. All the other blocks on the graph are additional water supplies that they were proposing to develop. You saw that from Salt Lake City today. We want them to take all of those other colored blocks off the graph, live within the one block that's currently developed. The projects that develop further water supplies will be, in essence, a water depletion to the Great Salt Lake. And so we did that. And this is a really nice graph which tells you what you have to do. But I'm going to make it simple. 100% of your home plumbing fixtures need to be converted to water conserving fixtures. I said that to a sister-in-law, and she said, well, I'm not doing anything till the farmers do something. And I said, well, then you're a jerk, because everybody's got to participate. Everybody has got to do their part, and even you do. And I'll really show you why. I don't know if she's going to like this, but because she's not here, so I can say it, right? I'll show you in a few minutes why she's got a lot more to do. But every conversion factor, every fixture in your home needs to be water conserving. Now, you don't need the legislature to mandate that. You don't need a city ordinance to mandate that. But if you can't do it, then we need those laws passed and ordinances passed that make you do it. No option. No 5-gallon flush toilets. They might the water away and even scour off the turd marks. But you don't need it. We need outside water conservation to be a way of life, not just something you think about. There was a slide earlier today which said, not just to solve our today's problems, but for the future. It has to be done. And we need to get rid of park strips. You know, maybe they're not a big area, but if you've got a park strip in your yard, shame on you, because you guys are here and you're smart enough to know that it's something that you're not using. So, and we need more reduction of those in the study too. We need to drop the water consumption dramatically in non-usable grass. Yeah, we want to keep sport fields open, but we don't want grass that just looks pretty. So this is my sister-in-law's house. Don't tell anybody I got her data. And she told me she did really great on water conservancy. She put in that whole area around her backyard in drip irrigation. And this is her water use. And the red is her neighborhood. And the blue is hers. And if you notice, she's still double the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is double what they should be. So there's a long way to go, folks. And I tell her that, and she said, but I can't get rid of my grass. And I said, well, then we'll pass a rule that you have to. If you're the one that can't, you got to save water. This is 247 gallons per capita day based on a normal household size that she's using. Now, you've heard all those numbers. We want to get down to 200. Well, that includes municipal and industrial. But the water going to the home, the homeowner is only about 125 in Salt Lake City, 122 in the 2020 data. And she's at 247. That's a problem. Don't tell her I told you that. They got 3 people in the house, and they're using 8,000 gallons to 11,000 gallons during the winter months. Those showers don't need to be that long. This is another person's house who's taken it to heart. Not that my wife liked it very much, but we have made certain that we don't have as much grass. And so my water use has dropped dramatically. I used to be like her, but I got the light. The vision came. I didn't pray for the vision, but I got it. So another study we did, I want to highlight why this is important. You individually need to be the cause of saving water. Conservation begins with you. Don't wait for a rule to make you do it. Do it because it's the right thing. And if we do that, we did this study, and there's only one column on there that matters. It's called the adaptive innovation. That means we're going to do everything we can to save water. It includes 100% fixtures. It includes removing grass that's just ornamental. It including doing subsurface and drip irrigations. And it includes a 30% or greater savings at the agricultural level, plus a bunch of cloud seeding. And if we do all of that, and we look at the projections, well, then we only lose 1.2 foot more on the Great Salt Lake, because we're going to see population growth. And no matter what, I was at a meeting once where they said the real problem is population growth, and we need to stop it. And I thought, well, there's a really good idea. You're going to control the bedrooms? I don't know what you're going to do, but you are not going to stop some of that from occurring. So we need to take the action to live within water supply so that the existing water supply provides all the water for those new uses that are going to come about. And if we do everything we can keep the Great Salt Lake not at 4198, but we can keep it in a band where it can still continue to exist and provide the ecosystem functions that it does today. That's our best hope, and it's only up to you to do it all. So counties and municipalities, they need to do their part. And they need to get rid of ordinance like this one, which requires 33% or more of the park strip to be a grassy type surface. What a waste. Now, I wouldn't say this is my city, but it is. But on the plus side, they're actually changing that ordinance now, I hope. The legislature, I think, is doing a good part. They're putting rules in place that say to the cities, you can't be stupid. And I hope that they don't be stupid. But we all not to be not stupid. We need to accept water conserving landscapes as a part of our existence. And if we do all that, or if we don't do all of that, the lake will continue to go down and it will be in trouble further than it is today. And if we do all of that, we might be able to negate the negative effects of all the other things that are going to occur that we can't completely stop. That's it. Thank you.
Wanted to thank Bob for the invitation, and I'm wearing two hats today. I'm going to talk about the Great Salt Lake Strike Team, as well as the Wilkes Center. I'm the Associate Director for the Wilkes Center, which is a really brand new center that was established last summer, thanks to the gift from Clay and Marie Wilkes. And our mission is to really hone in on climate. And I think we all recognize climate change at the background of a lot of the issues we've been talking about for the past 2 days. And I'll show you some graphs from the Great Salt Lake Strike Team that shows those issues will be magnified as we move forward into the next several decades. So just briefly about the center, our mission is to focus on a lot of things from science, education, entrepreneurship, and practical solutions to tackle issues in Utah. So Great Salt Lake is certainly at top of that list, but as well as nationally and internationally. So I want to take this opportunity to really do a shameless plug, but invite you to an event. I think that will be hopefully as exciting as this one, a 2-day event in mid-May, and May 16th to 17th, right here on the campus at the Alumni House. And this will be an opportunity for us to really grapple with climate solutions as well in Utah and beyond. And Great Salt Lake will be part of that discussion as well. So if you're interested, please talk to Ross out there who's tabling, and he will provide much more details about the event. But if you're interested, I invite you to go to wilkescenter.utah.edu/summit to register and receive updates. Okay, I'm glad to see all the work that the strike team has done being pretty prominently featured here over the 2 days. This was a response to a request from the legislature that happened just about a month after the center was established. And the team really involves lots of people, many of whom are right here in this room. And this was sort of co-led by many people, including Bill Andrig, our director, but several other key individuals that are listed right there. If you're interested in the document, you could probably Google it. And I think there are only a few hard copies left on Ross's table. But if you're interested in the hard copy, please see him as well. Okay, so I want to just summarize 3 key points from the strike team. If you remember these 3, I'll be happy. Okay, so I think first of all, we've seen enough to understand that human water use is the key factor in recent declines of the Great Salt Lake water levels in recent decades. But actually, that's kind of a hopeful thing, because it means that we as society have a lot of control over the water level. Okay, if it wasn't us, then really we can't do much about it, right? So that's actually kind of a hopeful message from the report. And secondly, as I'll show you, climate change is already taking place in the Great Salt Lake Basin. Okay, and what that means is that there will be less water available in the future. Okay, and that would magnify current challenges. Okay, so let me show you some of the evidence for climate change. Okay, glad to see Paul Brooks right there in the audience. So this is from Paul's work. Okay, so this is a temperature trace over the past century or so, and what you see is temperature rising in the past 4 decades or so. It's risen about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, now total precipitation in northern Utah has varied tremendously, as we all recognize. Over the past 4 decades, there appears to be a change in kind of amplitude. And if you just stare at that pattern, you might be able to detect that. But if you try to draw a trend line, it's pretty flat. So there's no long-term trend in terms of precipitation. Okay. So that's sort of the underlying sort of climate variables in recent decades. Okay. In terms of water inflow to the lake, here's Bear River, which accounts for about half of the inflow. We see that there has been a decline. Okay. And again, this has been mentioned multiple times, but the decline is due to consumptive use. Okay. So given that, what will happen to the future? Okay. So we don't have a crystal ball, but here are some projections. Okay. We saw some great projections yesterday from Bob Gillis, but here's another one. This is from my colleague, Cord Strong. And what he did, he took 30 climate models, the leading climate models from around the world. Okay, and there's this exercise called CMIP6, but I don't want to bore you with the details. So these are 30 of the leading models. They take one pretty plausible emission scenario, a scenario of greenhouse gas emissions. And here's the climate projection it simulates. Okay, so this goes out to 2100. And if you average the 30 models, the temperature rises pretty substantial, 11 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100. Okay, so the temperature will continue to go up, sort of continuing recent trends. How about total precipitation? Okay, it'll actually increase. Okay, this is pretty well understood because a warmer atmosphere can actually hold more water vapor. So in a future warmer climate, there will likely be an intensification of the hydrological cycle. Okay, so there's, under this scenario, about a 13% increase in precip. Okay, so that should be good news. But under a warmer climate, you also have a larger evaporation. Okay, so that higher precip is outweighed by the increased evaporation. So you're losing more water in a warmer climate. Okay, so on average, what we expect is actually less water available in the Great Salt Lake Basin. Okay, and I think you've heard a lot yesterday about a dwindling snowpack. So there will be less snow. There might be more total precip, but less snow. Okay, more evaporation, and the combination of those phenomena would really stress the system resilience. So it's something that we have to really be aware of as we move into the future. Okay, so let me just end by some of the key recommendations from the Great Salt Lake Strike Team. Okay, we really want to leverage wet years, and I think we've heard this multiple times. This is a really good opportunity this year with our record snowpack. But I think all evidence from the past is we cannot expect this type of phenomena to continue. Okay, so we will get, I'm pretty sure, a dry year pretty soon. Okay, this will not continue, but this is an opportunity because we have so much water to play with. Okay, and secondly, I think just Lynn has said it so much better, but we need to set a target range. Okay, some target, because you need to have a quantitative measure. Once you set a target, then you can back calculate exactly how much water is needed. Without that, we're just kind of driving aimlessly, right? So that helps to guide quantitative steps once you have a target. Third, invest in conservation. Okay, and one thing we found is given an average kind of inflow, which is not this year's, but given average inflows, average snowpacks, we need conservation just to maintain the current low water levels. Okay, so conservation is key. And finally, we need to invest in water monitoring and modeling, the kind of work we heard from Teresa earlier. But we need to have the information to shepherd the conserved water to the lake, and for that to inform decisions. Okay, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And as Professor Keiter said, I'm here wearing the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust Executive Director hat, but I'm also with National Audubon Society's Saline Lakes program. I'd also like to give a shout out to our partners, the Nature Conservancy in Utah, many representatives of whom are here in the audience. Professor Keiter had asked me to speak about the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust as part of the recommendations panel. And before I get into some of the details about the trust, I want to reiterate a point that I think has been made by a number of folks in different ways. And that is to address the challenges facing Great Salt Lake, we're going to need many, many tools and resources. And the Water Trust is one of those tools, but it needs to be part of the bigger picture. And so we're really pleased that there are strong efforts around municipal and industrial water conservation, agricultural optimization, all opportunities to work with the trust. There are efforts underway, certainly to do an integrated basin study, which we hope will help inform our work, particularly to the extent that we're looking at, they're looking at a water budget for Great Salt Lake and thinking about how environmental flows fit into that overall water budget, water and supply demand for the basin. We're also very pleased about the efforts going on to try to increase measuring and monitoring so that we can ensure that any work that the trust does it can identify water going to Great Salt Lake. So I'm going to just give you some quick components about the trust, tell you a little bit more, but definitely keeping this short as we were asked. So I have a much longer presentation about the structure of the trust, but just as a reminder, what really happened is the legislation set up a program, and that program is managed by the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Key components are that there's $40 million available to establish and implement the Water Trust to benefit Great Salt Lake, its wetlands, and hydrology. There is a requirement for a fiduciary to hold and administer those funds. There's a requirement for significant in-kind and monetary contributions to really leverage that $40 million into a greater number, whether it's in kind or in cash, if you will. There's an expectation to set up an endowment, as well as extensive annual reporting requirements. There's also the opportunity to set up any number of advisory councils for the trust, but one in particular is laid out in statute. It has 9 members representing interests from agriculture, aquaculture, mineral extraction, local landowners, waterfowl conservation organizations, non-game avian conservations organizations, an organization working on Great Salt Lake issues, water conservancy districts, and water sewer treatment facilities. So last year, the Nature Conservancy and Audubon Saline Lakes program partnered. We submitted an application to the Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, laying out a plan for how we would manage the $40 million if we were granted the award. And we did receive that award. The agreements, we're happy to say, were finalized to actually establish that trust as of January. So actually, the trust is actually really quite new, despite the legislation being passed last year. We had to select a fiduciary, and that is the Community Foundation of Utah. Some of you may know them. They've worked extensively with social impact investing in the state. The Trust Advisory Council is also just recently set up. The members of that, I won't name them unless you want me to, if I have enough time. But one of the issues I just want to touch on is a number of questions came up as to why tribal representation was not on the council. And we've looked at the legislation, and it does not simply allow that in its current form. But the advisory council that is set up recently adopted its bylaws, its rules of procedure, and part of those include a provision for consulting with tribes. Our organizations, Audubon and the Nature Conservancy, also have a plan in place for tribal engagement. We've met with one tribe, and I'm actually really personally excited about some of the ideas we're hearing from the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation in terms of their views and ideas for Great Salt Lake. So now I'm going to switch from the structure, and I would just say that Audubon and TNC as co-managers are doing this by agreement, and we have an executive committee that weighs in on all the decisions, as well as the advisory council. So if we, sorry, I guess I've messed up the slides here. There we go. So if we look at the purposes for what the trust was set up for and how we can spend that $40 million, I think one of the most important aspects of the trust is to retain and enhance water flows for Great Salt Lake. And so it's really exciting that just as we're kicking off the trust, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has committed to donate more than 20,000 acre feet annually in permanence for Great Salt Lake. So we look forward to working with the Department of Natural Resources and the church to help actually facilitate the culmination of this transfer. And that we look forward to in the next few months. We're also looking at many other opportunities. We have lots of opportunities coming in the door, and we have a process for vetting those. Additionally, there are 25% of the trust, so 10 million, is directed towards wetlands restoration and protection, particularly focused on habitats and wetlands, and in ways that benefit the hydrology of Great Salt Lake. There are many other provisions in the legislation as to how the money can be spent. Water distribution and management, I'm paraphrasing some of the statutory language, but certainly one of the things that we've learned as a result of a transaction or two transactions that Audubon and TNC worked on with Rio Tinto Kennecott and Central Utah Water Conservancy District and the Division of Wildlife is that there are a lot of opportunities for improving water distribution control structures. In the lower Jordan River, where our transaction occurred, there are very old systems that, frankly, some of them are not safe, but they're also, I would say, call them bottlenecks to flexible water management. So there are a lot of opportunities to partner with owners or managers of those structures to find ways to improve those to ensure that we're getting water there, as well as working with groups like the Division of Water Rights or USGS in supporting efforts for telemetry and monitoring, engaging, as well as other water management and planning efforts. Additionally, there is this, we can use the funds to help with our engagement efforts with a wide range of stakeholders, including agriculture, local landowners, local governments, tribal entities, and many, many other groups. So with that, I would say that as we're setting this trust up, one of the things that we're working on, because we can, I mean, there's a catch-all in the statute, the money can be used for other purposes that enhance and preserve or protect Great Salt Lake. We are working on a strategic plan to help prioritize how the funding can be spent. What are the evaluation criteria for projects, making sure that the money that is been put aside by the state of Utah is spent well. Also, trying to define ways that we can measure success. Certainly, Speaker Wilson is very interested in understanding what the success of the trust is. Is it doing what it was set up to do? So we're fortunate that we are working with the Nature Conservancy, who has a group within its organization called Nature for Water Facility that is advising global funds, water funds globally, and they're helping us along with other experts develop that strategic plan, which we hope to be able to bring out further to the public in later this year, probably mid-year. So just point out the websites where you can go to get more information. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has a Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Program Trust website for the program. The Water Trust, or GSL WET, as our acronym, has a website as well. We're continuing to add content to that as we move forward. And then additionally, the Community Foundation of Utah has a place on its website. If people want to go to actually donate to the trust, help us create that significant match that's required by the legislation. And so I would just throw out that if you're an organization or a person who wants to engage with the trust and you haven't heard from us, please feel free to reach out either by going to the watertrust.org website to include your contact info, or you can reach out to me personally and someone will get back to you. Additionally, if you're someone who is interested in leasing, selling, or donating water or wetlands work, also please reach out. And I think that as the trust continues to get up and running, as we are able to talk about some of the transactions and work that we're working on, we really look forward for an opportunity to coming back out to the public and providing more details. So thank you.
Thank you all three for those comments and suggestions leading us toward solutions. A couple of questions to begin with. Leland, I gathered from your work on the advisory council, or the advisory council's work over the last 10, 12 years or so, that there have been a great number of studies that have come out. What steps have been taken to implement those studies? Are you promoting incentives, or I got a sense that some regulatory steps like changing municipal ordinance, et cetera, might be an appropriate way to move forward with the results of those studies?
Well, sort of when the council was formed, we were told we were advice, but not implementation. So we've provided a lot of information to the agencies, also to the legislature. And we've suggested ways that improvements can be made, but we haven't actually, nor do we have any money to actually implement those steps. That's why we're so excited about the Great Salt Lake Commissioner, who will have more authority to actually look at those implementation processes.
Okay. John, the Great Salt Lake Strike Team has come forth with a very thorough report, quite a lot of compelling suggestions in there and helpful information. What's the next step for the Strike Team?
Well, I think it's partly a kind of a push and pull situation. We're as a team ready for additional requests. So the original team was formed in response to a legislature's request for more information. So we're eager to hear from the legislature. Are there specific aspects they need more information about? But yeah, hopefully the team, maybe with new members or different members, will continue to exist to provide really hopefully objective and timely information.
Okay. And are you, given the information that you provided, how does the team feel about the response that the legislature provided this last legislative session?
I would say more personally, it's great to see, well, first of all, the figures being talked about so much. We've seen a lot of the figures and the information from the report, and it has been gratifying to see some of that information used in the recent session.
Okay. Marcelle, with the water trust, I take it that some of the money can be used to purchase water rights, and I guess my question is, what assurance do we have? Has the trust thought about how to make sure that that water ultimately ends up in the lake?
No, it's a great question, Professor Keiter. As we look at opportunities to either purchase or lease water, each one of those needs to be looked at individually. And part of that assessment is looking at how do we get the water to the lake. And as I said before, we have had that experience with the water transactions we did previously with Rio Tinto Kennecott and Central Utah Water Conservancy District. But usually what happens is when you identify a project like that or an opportunity like that, there is an opportunity to meet with the Division of Water Rights before any kind of application is filed or any request to move the water to beneficial use in Great Salt Lake. And it's a really great opportunity to try to work through what are the hurdles or the opportunities to make sure that we are getting that water there. And so part of that is looking at where your point of diversion is and how are you going to measure that? And then how is it going to get shepherded or distributed, excuse me, Teresa, distributed down the river. So,
okay, thank you. Another thought that occurred to me is that we've got three entities that have been created over time here, and have you three entities worked together yet? And thinking ahead, what opportunities are there, or how ought we to be thinking about promoting a collaboration between all of these various entities that have been created and that are focused in one way or another on the Great Salt Lake and recovering and restoring the lake? Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, I had some thoughts as I was looking at the beautiful lawns in Leland's presentation. And one issue that the Wilkes Center for Climate Science and Policy has tackled is urban heat, actually. It's a really big issue in terms of the impact on residents and the quality of their life. And it's intertwined with water, certainly. And it's something that there's sort of environmental justice issues as well. It's an issue that we had a hackathon on and a lot of students engaged in. And that's an example I can think about of where different entities can come together, including with Leland's, because water is part of that. Vegetation is part of that. And then we have to make sure we get the water to the lake. There's a lot of trade-offs you can think about. You need to water the trees, the lawns, and the parks. So it's something that requires a lot of smart people coming together.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, that the council, the strike team are set there and have been the duty and responsibility of those groups, of our groups, has been to advise, to help, to bring about understanding, to bring forth suggestions. But the real action has to be at the part of the individual and at the part of the local government entities who control a lot of these issues. I've always believed that I've heard a lot of talk about, well, how do you pay for water? And do we take away taxes? And do we do lots of other things like this? Well, in my opinion, you have to give a basic right to water to everyone, and you can't just simply say, I'm going to control water use by the cost of water. But I certainly believe that through the cost of water, you should be able to control excess use. So my poor sister-in-law ought to have her bill quadrupled, or 10 times that amount if they want to have that kind of a yard. I don't disagree with it, and I think it's important to maintain a certain degree of vegetation around a home to prevent heat. But every home ought to have the right to that water, at least enough to do that. And then if you want to use more, if you want to have 1.5 acres of grass and you don't like one single brown blade of grass in that, then your water bill shouldn't be $300 a month. It should be $3,300 a month or $33,000 a month, enough to motivate whatever your income level is to stop doing it and realize that it's something that's more important than your backyard or your little patch of earth.
Marcelle, did you want to comment on?
Sure. I think and I think we're already seeing it as we look at opportunities and kind of how the trust can focus its efforts and funding, working with a lot of different partners. Organizations like the Strike Team or Great Salt Lake Advisory Council or the state agencies and federal agencies that are working on studies can be a resource helping answer some of the technical questions, and also that help us think about where does the water go once it gets into Great Salt Lake and past the impounded wetlands. Are there places that we want to prioritize activities? What does that look like? Are there interactions between the wetlands and subsurface that keep the crust wet? And so I think that trying to work with partners like this that can help with some of those questions that may come up presents an opportunity. And just as Audubon and, our organizations individually, we've worked with the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council previously and, look forward to that continuing relationship.
We've got several questions from the audience. Let me try to consolidate a few of them. Leland, you struck a chord with your presentation, and in particular, when you noted that roughly 90% of the wastewater that comes out of Salt Lake City ends up or a good bit of it ends up going to the Great Salt Lake. So the question is, doesn't that argue for encouraging more domestic use to get more water to the Great Salt Lake or not?
Well, here's the deal. You want to conserve in the home because we want to live within the water as continued growth occurs. So yeah, it doesn't, if most of the water, you don't have a big loss, a couple of 3% of the water that you would use in your home doesn't end up in the Great Salt Lake or somewhere else, but most of it does. So if you decide you want to flush a little bit more often, yeah, that water is going to get there today. But that water is now, the use of that water is no longer available for another person, another development that's going to occur, because I don't think you're going to be able to stop them all. I live in Sugar House and the amount of apartments going in are significant. And yet every one of those homes are going to want to have water for their toilet too. So I need to conserve water at my toilet, even though it's going to get to the lake. So their water will get to the lake also through their toilet. And I think that's important to realize, is that we're not just doing it, at the home level to provide for the lake today. We're doing it so that we can continue to have a lake and other people can be part of this ecosystem too. Our kids, our grandkids. I don't have great grandkids, but them too.
John, a question. What's the Strike Team done to measure the amount of groundwater under the Great Salt Lake and the West Desert? And could that be tapped to replenish the surface waters?
I have to say that the Strike Team has to produce a report in a few months' time. So we didn't have time to really, drill down into the groundwater in some ways. But I agree, the groundwater issue is a really important one. But I'm glad we have wonderful colleagues in geology and geophysics. I see Bill Johnson here and Paul Brooks, real experts that can, I think, require more research and provide more, I think, certain numbers for that. But I agree, groundwater is an important issue.
So there's a question about the Great Salt Lake commissioner position, which has just been created. At least the question posits that GRAMA requests are not going to be, that the commissioners to be protected from GRAMA requests. So the concern is about holding the commissioner accountable for these actions. I realize that's a bit of a legal question, but I'm wondering more broadly about the potential role of the commissioner, and if the three of you who have been involved with this for some time have thought about how the commissioner integrates with these other initiatives.
Can I start? When we were working on establishing the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, we had the council to establish the council. How about that? When we were working on that, one of the things we identified as we met with the agencies involved in the Great Salt Lake is that they all were doing a good job, but they operated within silos. There was nothing to cohesively bring them together to look at the whole. And so you had one group over here doing this because that was their silo responsibility, and another group over here doing this because that was their silo responsibility. And sometimes those thises conflicted. And so the idea of a commissioner is someone who can then try and bring those together. Now, relative to the grammar problem, I don't care.
Thanks. To add to Leland's point, I think even some of the other studies, the HCR 10 recommendations, the Great Salt Lake strategies, did identify the need for greater coordination, not just across state agencies and federal agencies, but also with local governments and others. So I think continued focus on that coordination is going to be particularly important. And it will be, I think it would be interesting if the commissioner's role can help ensure that as decisions are made in the future, those decisions take into account the impact on Great Salt Lake. So there is a balancing and an understanding of trade-offs. And I hope that I'm not sure how the commissioner is going to develop a strategic plan by November, but I hope there's an opportunity for everyone to weigh in and help that. But I imagine that kind of strategy document will be iterative and would need to be given all the challenges we face. So
I don't think I have much to add, but it was really the coordination, breaking down the silos. I think I have some hope for the role of the commissioner.
Can I throw one more thing out? Because I am tacky. If you believe that this poor guy or gal who gets this position is going to operate in the shadows, you are seriously misguided, because this person is going to be under a spotlight. And so if the worry is over whether or not they're going to be doing everything in the light of day, I think that's a serious overstatement of their worry. This person, whoever it is, God bless them, with the energy to do the job right, is going to be under an immense amount of pressure and spotlight to make sure that they do what's necessary to protect the citizens in the Great Salt Lake.
We've got another question that a number of people put thumbs up to, and it ties back into this question of setting a target elevation level, or at least a range. That was part of the strike team's recommendations, as I recall. The governor this morning suggested that really wasn't all that important. What are your respective thoughts on setting a target level or range?
It's there. It was in the original Great Salt Lake Comprehensive Management Plan. It's there. We've seen pictures of it on the graph, on the wall up here, multiple times. We know what the range is. If we need to give it a number, well, if that makes people happy, just like the governor said, let's do it. But we know what the number needs to be. We know we're getting too low now. And we know that 4211 was probably too high. We know that, like mentioned in one of the earlier presentations, that between 4197, 4996 to 4205, we got the sweet spot. We ought to be living within the sweet spot. And so if you want to give it a number, pick a number, but I don't want to just say that's the top we should go to, because if it gets to 4298 and we got more water to put in it, let's go to 4200,
I sort of have a similar sentiment. In some ways, there's no magic number, right? Is it 4198? It's probably a range. So I think as important is to set a target range instead of a magic number, because I think that's kind of a mistaken thinking. Once it's a certain number, then it's fine. But we need at least to have a range to shoot for.
So, Leland, I'm going to let you have the last word here because you've shocked some people in the audience
Did I
who are
swear again?
confused. We swim in the Great Salt Lake, but that's occurs after someone flushes the toilet. That's where it goes.
Hey, you know, if you drink water in the Salt Lake Valley, there was somebody uphill that flushed into your water supply too. So direct potable reuse isn't happening very often, but indirect potable reuse is happening all the time. And we don't, you know, so how many here are over 70? So those of you who are over 70, did you ever go out to Black Rock Beach back in the 60s or maybe even the late 50s? When Salt Lake City's discharge went out there and it was like barely screened. And all the rest of them went right down the Jordan River or the Surplus Canal, out there barely screened. It's a lot better, and that water's not harming you nowadays like it would have. So, yeah, we do. We swim in it, but we use it.
With that, let me, I wanted to end on an up note, right? Okay. With that, join me in thanking Leland, John, and Marcelle. And we will move to our final panel, who brings some of our speakers back up from previously, coming from different perspectives to try to pull this further together.